What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another edition of the Jace for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. We got Jace Jumpers, Jaron Jackson Jr.'s, John Morant's, Joe Johnson's, Ja Raffs, of course. We've got Jace. We got him for days. Josh, how you doing?
You know, we've been wrong about some things this year. But the first thing I thought of last night when I saw the Tennessee score with, midway through the second half or so was, well, right on schedule.
Yep.
we talked about this. It's going to happen about every 6 games. And what do you know? That was, 54 points.
That's not very many points.
No.
Not very many points at all. And, simultaneously, 67 for a not great Florida team, that's about as bad of a defensive performance as you're probably going to get from them. They shot 44% from the field and 35% from the three-point line and got to the line 24 times, that being Florida. So the point there being is that they didn't have to do a ton more offensively to win the game. And they were so bad offensively that they didn't even come close to winning the game. And that's just going to happen. That's just going to happen.
And watching the end of it, the one thing I think it is worth noting, 2 of these 4 losses for Tennessee have actually come when they've scored at least 66 points. Obviously, this was not one of those.
Yeah.
But it's not right. It's not like they have 4 losses where they've scored in the 50s.
Right.
One of those
was Arizona, right?
Right, which I think it was 75-70 or something. That was just, they played a really good team on the road. They didn't play bad at all that game. They would have beat most teams in the country on that day. They just happened to play another really good team in a hostile environment.
Mm-hmm.
They just looked, and this is really where I'm concerned from an NCAA tournament perspective. I turned this on after the end of the Xavier game to see if they could put a late run together. They looked so lost. Every possession. It was just, to use a phrase from our friend Chris, just flailing around, launching threes with guys in their face. There was no plan whatsoever. And that's what really worries me, is not just that they're going to have bad offensive performances, but that just when it goes bad, I just don't have any confidence they can kind of solve the problem. They can get easy buckets, find a way to just survive and hold on, because when it gets bad, it gets real bad.
I'm going to ask you a question to further your point. Who's the go-to guy? Who's the guy that when you absolutely have to have a basket, who are you going to?
Ziegler.
Are you positive about that?
Because he's so comfortable with the ball in his hands.
Right.
Josiah Jordan-James is probably their best offensive player. But right, he's not a give him the ball and let him go to work guy, which is why I would say Ziegler. You're asking somebody to get a shot, to me it's Ziegler.
The 5'9". So you're asking, right. So when you can't get a great shot with your offense, your answer is my 5'9" guard. And the only way that he gets a clean look is if it's in bigger offense, or he breaks somebody's ankles. Right? That's why 6'8" guards that can handle are so sought after. Because a 6'8", 6'9" guard, Jason Tatum, it doesn't matter who's guarding him.
Mm-hmm.
And if the guy is fooled by his dribble moves or not, Jason Tatum can get a clean look off.
Right. Because he's either going to shoot over you or he's going to get by you.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if his dribbles, quote unquote, worked. He can still jump in the air, and even if your hand's right there, it's still ultimately he can see the front of the rim.
Right.
And right, like you said, you would love for that to be Josiah Jordan-James, but 2 of 11 for him in this game. You weren't exactly going to him. You weren't exactly going to hand the ball to him late in the game, especially with the sporadic season that he's had.
And he's just not an isolation scorer anyway.
Right.
Yeah, that is what I came away thinking about from a Tennessee standpoint was, this happens sometimes. That's nothing new. We don't need to harp on that. Mm-hmm. But just the inability to solve the problem when it happens is what I'm really worried about. And then also real quick on Florida, massive, obviously, to get them back in the NCAA tournament conversation, specifically because their next 2 games are at Kentucky and at Alabama. Now, if they can get one of those, the rest of the season, their toughest game is at Arkansas. I think they got Vanderbilt twice and Ole Miss in there, Georgia in there. All these winnable games. If they can pick up one more road win here, coming off of this win, they are set up to have a really strong end to the season, a lot of confidence going into the SEC tournament. I actually feel pretty good about their NCAA tournament chances, despite the fact that they're probably on the outside looking in right now, because that schedule is going to lighten up for them, and they've been playing well in SEC play. And by the way, they don't have a bad loss.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Because the one that looked bad is, now a top 25 team in the country in Florida Atlantic.
Right. I mean, on the other side of that, there's no reason to believe. Like, this is more about Tennessee than it is about Florida for me.
Sure.
I don't actually have any faith in Florida to go into Kentucky or go into Alabama and win either of those games.
Even if they don't, though, there's still a path to the NCAA tournament. That was really my point.
I might disagree with that.
If they should win almost every game they play after those two.
Yeah, but none of those games help them get into the tournament. They only help them not get into the tournament if they lose them. I mean, if you beat Arkansas, but Arkansas isn't exactly, Arkansas is basically a 500 basketball team right now.
At some point, that if you can pile up the wins in the SEC, though, right? Because that's half of Florida's problem right now is they just don't have enough wins.
Right. But they also don't have good wins either.
Right.
It's not like they have 4 really nice wins. Yeah. They just need the volume. But now they have their win to build the resume on, though. That is helpful. That is certainly helpful. But yeah, it will certainly have to start with them winning one of the next 2 games. And you get Kentucky again, you get Arkansas. Mm-hmm. So, there is something there, but right, things will have to fall your way to be an 18-13. They're projected to finish 18-13 and 11-7 in the SEC. They'd probably have to do better than that.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be enough. Yeah.
But Todd Golden, at times it's not looked great, but on January 4th, this team was 500. Now they're 4 games over 500. So not playing too terrible. A brand of basketball at the moment. Okay, before we get into kind of the big marquee games the last few days, I want to talk about Indiana. If you'll indulge me for a second,
please do.
I think I've decided what Indiana's biggest problem is.
Okay,
and it seems, and it's a little bit of a no duh, and it's a little bit of a problem that is a result of Xavier Johnson not being there. But even with Xavier Johnson there, and I'll start the point by asking you a question. How many players, you can include Xavier Johnson, how many players on Indiana's roster are you confident in what you're going to get from them every single night? Like, know for sure you're going to get that from them every single night.
1.5.
Right? Like, obviously, Trace Jackson Davis is 1.
And from a contribution standpoint, Race Thompson, in terms of what just the kind of player he is, what he's going to give you defensively, the rebounding. Now, I said half because sometimes Race Thompson can give you 20 points and sometimes Race Thompson gives you 4. Mm-hmm. So from an offensive standpoint, I would say more like 1.25.
And even Race Thompson, right? Like, you would love for Race Thompson's every night game to be 9 points.
Right.
But it's like either, right? He has like 11, 16. He had a 20-point win game against Little Rock, but also he has a 2-5-6, 2-0, 4-0, 4-5.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked specifically at Xavier Johnson and his splits yet, but when he was healthy, Xavier Johnson was scoring 15, 22, 27, 17, 20, 24, 29, 30, 28. Oh, sorry, that's percentage. LOL. I was like, what in the world? Xavier Johnson.
That's a lot. I was going to say
that. That's percentage of points while he was on the floor. My bad. Yeah, he's also, right. 4, 7, 23, 7, 9, 16, 20, 8, 4, 11. And then he got hurt in the Kansas game and hasn't played since. That is Indiana's biggest problem. And that is why Indiana is different from Purdue. because there's a lot. I mean, Indiana and Purdue play on Saturday, and there's a lot of conversation in the city right now about those two teams. That's why those two teams are different. They both have an elite big man, but I can name 4 guys on Purdue's team that I am confident in what I'm going to get outside of Zach Edey every single night. And I'm not confident in anybody right now outside of Trace Jackson Davis. And what got me thinking about this is because they lost to Maryland in a 66-55 loss. That was just ugly. And Trace Jackson Davis had 18 points and 20 rebounds on 7 of 13 shooting, and they had no chance to win the basketball game. Because nobody else gave them anything else. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I throw a stat in there?
Sure, hit me.
This is one of those things that you just really have to kind of dig in mentally to even figure out how it's possible. Okay, 8 players saw the court for Indiana in this game.
Okay.
5 of them shot 50% or better from the field, including Trace Jackson Davis, like you said, who, did his thing. Now, some of those guys took only a couple shots off the bench, but still, 5 of your 8 players shot 50% or better. Indiana shot 37.5% as a team, because Jalen Hood-Schifino and Tamar Bates were 2 of 19.
Mm-hmm. And that's basically where I'm getting here, is that right. Without Xavier Johnson in the backcourt, and I wrote a little bit about this for a blog post for the radio station I worked for yesterday about Tamar Bates and Trey Galloway specifically, because they are the epitome of guys that on the right night can give you something, but you should not have to depend on them night in and night out. Because there's a lot of conversation about, man, when Tamar Bates and Trey Galloway are playing well, Indiana looks scary. And that is true. But if anybody is tricking themselves into thinking that Indiana can depend on Trey Galloway and Tamar Bates for offensive production every single night, they're kidding themselves. And Jalen Hood-Schifino, while spectacular when he's on, is wildly inconsistent. He's got 3 21-plus point games in the calendar year, so 2023. He's also failed to eclipse 6 points 3 of the last 4 games, and that 4th game that he did eclipse it, he had 24 and knocked down like 7 threes. So he's wildly inconsistent, super talented, but wildly inconsistent. And you just can't be depending on Trey Galloway and Tamar Bates to, along with Hood-Schifino. Too often you're going to run into a situation like you did the other night where just the 3 of them combined don't give you nearly enough. And that's what I've decided. We can talk about the shooting, which has actually been pretty good this year. I was astounded. Mm-hmm. There are like 4 guys shooting better than 40% from the 3-point line. For
it's way. If that was the thing holding them back heading into the season, they should be way better than they are. Yeah,
they're 22nd in the country. They're 22nd in the country in 3-point field goal percentage.
Wow.
Right now.
Yeah.
Now they are 343rd in the country in 3-point field goal attempts to field goal attempts. Now, when your best player is Trace Jackson Davis, I get it. I understand. Mm-hmm. I don't know what Purdue's is off the top of my head, but I'm guessing Purdue is not very high on that list either because of Zach Edey. So that's not a knock, but it's like for 3-point shooting to really be an impact, you'd rather be like the 50th best, but shooting like 75th in that other stat, right? Mm-hmm. Then it's making a bigger splash. I mean, Purdue's actually right in the middle of the country, basically 146th in that category,
which is lower than normal.
Lower than normal. But
I would
assume. Also part of the. Let's see, what were they last year? Last year they were 139th. Interesting. I bet we'd have to go back to like pre-Travion Williams and Zach Edey days to get a different number.
Right. It's Matt Painter being an intelligent basketball coach, building around what he has to work with. Right. I'm sure they were much higher when Carson Edwards was the focal point.
I'm sure they were.
And now you've got 2 elite bigs, and now the best player in the country. Right. We're gonna, and none of those guys shoot the ball, so we're gonna play around them and fill it out from there. Yeah.
So that's ultimately why Indiana is going to fall short in the tournament, because they're just going to have one of those nights. And maybe you would love for Xavier Johnson to come back and like be Xavier Johnson by like tournament time. But even if he does come back, it would be a stretch to expect him to be the guy that he was early in the season. And I think that's ultimately what's going to cause Indiana to fall short, is that they're just going to have a night because they depend on too many guys on a nightly basis that aren't ready to produce on a nightly basis like that. And that's not necessarily anybody's fault, but I decided that was a different way to look at it and that I've been thinking about over the week. So thought I'd share.
Astute observation.
Thank you.
And it's It's the difference between being a team capable of making a run and a team built to make a run, right? Because on any given day, right, if everything goes well, sure, Indiana can knock off a 2 seed, a 1 seed, whatever it might be, 3 seed, and all of a sudden find themselves in the Sweet 16. It's 100% conceivable because their ceiling is incredibly high. Their floor is also incredibly low,
Right.
where you pick the wrong game and you're out before you even win an NCAA tournament game again. And the bigger question we keep harping on, especially as we're getting close to tournament time here, is can you do it for 3, 4, 5, 6 games to actually get yourself to the later rounds of the tournament?
Exactly. So Indiana, they play Purdue on Saturday, and that will be, of course, Indiana will beat Purdue because that's how it'll happen. But I won't be there to be part of the celebration because I'm certainly not going to predict that. But of course, that'll happen, and then around here we'll get to endure that until they play again at Mackey Arena, which thankfully is like not that far away. I think they play twice in like a. Oh, I lied. It's several weeks from now. It's the end of February. I thought for some reason it was like only 10, 12 days apart, but I was wrong. So we'll have to endure it for an entire 3 weeks. That's okay, though. Part of a good Saturday.
Yeah.
Part of a really good Saturday, but we'll get to that. I will run down the weekend schedule right at the end of the podcast. Okay, we had some pretty big games this week. Last night in the Big East, Providence and Xavier delivering another Big East showdown, and earlier in the week, Kansas getting revenge on K-State in a 90-78 fashion. Several things to talk about here. Where do you want to start? We can start with Kansas and Kansas State if that's cool with you. Is that cool with you?
Sure.
Is that okay? Okay. Chronological order, is that fair?
Never a bad thing.
Perfect. 90-78 Kansas, what say you?
Well, the first thing I was thinking about watching this game is, when it goes bad for Kansas State, they just decide to turn the ball over against two of the best transition teams in the country. Right? The times that they've kind of, and this game they found a way to hang in there, but the couple times they've really looked overmatched, it was when TCU crushed them, and this game. And I said after the TCU game, might not be another team in the country you want to avoid letting get out in transition more. And if there is a team, that team might be Kansas. And they simply turned the ball over too much, and I thought the turnover count was higher than it actually ended up being because it just felt like it was turnover after turnover. But Kansas's bench, productive. Kevin McCullough couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, but got to the free throw line 12 times. DeJuan Harris was his team's second leading scorer behind Jalen Wilson, who, again, didn't have a spectacular game, but found a way to just manufacture points. They just look like Kansas again. That's a very good sign. The other thing, the more interesting part of this I want to talk about is on the offensive end of the floor, Kansas State's floor is exceptionally high. I mean, they scored 78 points with all of those turnovers and their best two players going 12 of 37.
Yeah, they scored 78. Their best players scored 55 points.
Yeah, they did generate. The only
reason this game was close is because they went to the free throw line 36 times.
Right. They generated points from the free throw line, but it wasn't like they were, knocking down shots and were just absolutely unguardable. And they still got 78 points on the road at Kansas. Now, they couldn't get consecutive stops to save their lives. They couldn't keep Kansas off the boards. They returned the ball over. They weren't winning this game. They didn't play anywhere near well enough. And every time they kind of got a little bit of momentum going, Kansas would do something, dunk, three, whatever, and then it would just stay at, 10 points or whatever. They did hang in there for long stretches where it was back and forth, but they just couldn't put together the run they needed to actually get back in the game. There are clear flaws here, which is why I think both you and I are hesitant to really buy into Kansas State as a national title contender. Those flaws got exposed. I think Marquise Noel had 5 turnovers in this game. He just kind of got lost. And you have, again, two of the better perimeter defenders in the country, and DeJuan Harris and Kevin McCullough out there. That helps. But it is, for a team that nobody expected anything out of, it's just amazing to me, this idea that even with all the things that didn't go well, it wasn't the offense that was the problem in this game. They gave up 90 points.
And I still will never be fully into the way that their offense is constructed.
Oh, sure.
They have two guys that are good enough. The rest aren't. And I mean, as yes, they scored 78 points, but they also, on the flip side of it, only had 20 field goals in the whole game.
Yeah.
Like that's the type of, like, Indiana had 19 field goals in a game that we just talked about how poorly Indiana's offense was in that game. Yeah. So, like, I hear where you're coming from, but, like, we have to at least acknowledge the fact that 31 of their 78 points came from the line. It's not exactly replicable. And will always be nervous because I also just don't think you should ever lose a game in which your two best players get you 55, regardless of how they do it. Like that one's also just tough. And maybe it's just maybe it's just a result of playing Kansas.
I would argue that's just part of the reality of this team, that is something that can happen because of the turnovers, because of the defense, because of the lack of depth in terms of reliable production. Yeah. Generally, I agree with you. I think Kansas State is an exception to that, though, which is not necessarily a good thing.
I also think, Kansas got bench production in this game, and Kansas State didn't. Not really. I mean, they got 9 points off the bench, but I think their bench made one field goal. I think like 4 of those 7 points from, who was it? I can't remember which one it was. From Ishmael Masad. He had 2 points. It was Desi Sills who had 7 points and went to the line 8 times.
Mm-hmm. And that was a Desi Sills who, what was it, 22 or something when they played the first time?
Yeah, something like that.
He became that third scorer. And they didn't have that in this game.
The other thing, I think I've decided that DeJuan Harris is Kansas's most important player. Not their best player. And obviously that goes without of course, Jalen Wilson needs to score 20 almost every night. But when DeJuan Harris is actually a threat to put the ball in the basket, not just distribute, that's what brings Kansas's offense from manageable to it's really, really hard to stop them. I mean, they scored 90 in this game, and Grady Dick was 2 of 8 from the field. Yep.
It allows, KJ Adams not to score 16 points. It allows for a bad shooting night. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Right. I mean, there were 3 guys who had scored 16 points in this game or more, and the 2 in the starting lineup who didn't have also scored 16 points or more, like in the last few days. I don't know if that's completely accurate, but KJ Adams certainly has. I don't know if it's been only a couple days since Grady Dick has, but certainly Grady Dick is capable of scoring 20 for you. And when DeJuan Harris is not just the facilitator and the defender he is, but also is putting pressure on the defense as a scorer, and it doesn't even have to be like in their 3-game losing streak, he scored 5 total points.
Right. Oh, it was real bad.
5.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like not per game, 5.
And Kevin McCullough was not much better.
No.
Yeah.
5. From your starting point guard, you got 5 points in 3 games. It's not good enough.
Nope.
Now, 26 points combined in the last 2, that's good enough. And even with 18 coming from this game in particular, like him having 8 and 8 is plenty. Like somewhere in the 10 points per game ballpark for your starting point, like 8 and 8, 8 and 6, 9 and 7. Don't turn the ball over. That's good enough. But he can't, for Kansas to make a deep run. And the best version of Kansas, DeJuan Harris, is doing all of the things he's very good at in terms of distributing and taking care of the basketball. He only had 1 turnover in this game. Only had 2 assists, but that's because he was scoring the basketball in this game. But he doesn't turn it over. He defends really well. It's just when he falls asleep as any sort of scorer offensively, then it can be very like, oh my God, Jalen Wilson, will you please shoot 26 times and hopefully you get 30 points, right? Like that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's when Kansas becomes vulnerable. But when he's scoring some, they are much more difficult to stop.
Yeah, it's really not that complicated, right? They have 1 elite reliable scorer. They have 2 secondary scorers who on any given day can give you 20. who also sometimes give you 8 and 6 or,
Mm-hmm.
10 and 7 or something. And then they had the 2 wild cards, who are Kevin McCullough and DeJuan Harris, your defensive aces, who are also capable of scoring in double figures. I mean, Kevin McCullough found a way to do it without even shooting the ball well at all in this game. But in that losing streak, they completely disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And now they are back helping this team again. And so you're not relying on 3 guys to get you, 60 to 70 points combined and Jalen Wilson to give you 25 to 30.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden he can have an inefficient 20 and it's okay because you got all these other guys chipping in. And the bench comes up and gives you another 10, 15 points. I don't know what happened, but they seem to have fixed whatever the issue was because they look back to being themselves again.
I will go to bat for Kevin McCullough a little bit. This is his 4th straight game in double figures.
Yeah, he came out of the slump a little bit earlier. Like the first one was Baylor?
Kansas State. No, Kansas State, he had 0. He had 10 and 14 against TCU and Baylor.
Okay. Right. They got run off the floor against TCU. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I had the Kansas State game burned into my mind because I remembered that was a goose egg. Yeah. Yeah. He's consistently over the past couple weeks been, and again, it's not like he's shooting the ball exceptionally well, but he's finding ways. It's offensive rebounding. It's, getting to the free throw line, hitting some timely threes, just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, he's a little Draymond Greenish in the stuffs the stat sheet. He had 10 rebounds and 4 assists in this game. And he's in the sense that you just desperately wish that Draymond was better offensively in anything other than passing, right? And McCullough certainly not that bad, but he doesn't necessarily have to be scoring to impact the game, but he also needs to be better than 0 points. That's also not good enough for your starting shooting guard. So that needs to be better as well. But all of those things were better in this game. And when Kansas scores 90 at home, you're probably not going to beat them.
Yeah. It was going to be a monumental task anyway. And now that Kansas has kind of got their mojo back, you had to play a pretty much a perfectly game. Wow. I don't know what happened there. Play a pretty much perfect game. And Kansas State did not come close to doing that.
Yeah. To your point though, and we'll wrap with this before we get to Providence and Xavier, still only a 12-point loss. I think I think that is, props to Jerome Tang getting to the free throw line. I'm sure Bill Self is shaking his players until they, scream about letting the other team get to the line 36 times. But still a 12-point game. Yeah, Kansas State, Kansas. I really hope this continue. It's so fun when Kansas and Kansas State play 2 really awesome games a year. And both of these games were awesome, right? This one not more lopsided than the other one, but still
from an atmosphere standpoint.
Right. We picked 2 games to talk about this week, and Kansas and Kansas State was one of them. I mean, we're talking when was the last time that was the case?
And it was obvious. Yeah. Easily the best matchup of the week.
Right. 7 versus 8.
Yeah.
When was the last time that was the thing? Hasn't been recently. Even the year that Kansas State won a share of the Big 12 title not all that long ago.
Yeah.
It was just it just wasn't the same. And this year they are toe to toe, and I hope it continues. The other big game this week, Xavier welcomed Providence to the Centos Center. I know I'm not supposed to like anything about Xavier as a Butler grad, but the Centos Center.
You're all about the Centos Center.
The Centos Center looks lit. I texted a buddy who lives in Cincinnati during the game and said, "Listen, dude, if you ever get a chance to go to a Xavier game, he's not a college basketball guy, just a friend from high school, and he's gotten into the Bengals recently, and as one would if they were living in Cincinnati. And I said, if you ever get a chance, you need to go and see a game at Centos Center because it looks lit and it always delivers, and especially when it's really good basketball.
I mean, we can take a road trip.
Which last night we might have to. Which last night was Xavier 85, Providence 83 without Zach Freemantle. Jack Nungy, Colby Jones, and Sully Boom combined for 63 of the team's 85 points. That's not too bad. And with that being said, barely escape with a win over Providence. And I really thought that Jared Bynum had made that shot.
Too.
I really thought that was going in.
He got it over the rim and it just sat there.
Yep.
And then it was almost like some kind of wind came in and just redirected it out of the rim.
Yeah, it's like the entire right side of the arena just blew in the direction of the ball.
Yeah.
I really thought it was going.
I was 100%. I went, that looks, yeah.
I also got a really big kick out of the commentators thinking that Jared Bynum was hurt and really
he was just on the floor. And by that.
They were like, there seems to be an injury. I'm like, no, dude, he just like collapsed to the floor and like, oh, that was so close.
Disbelief,
right? Like,
yeah,
in disbelief, exactly.
I'm glad you had that confusion too, because I thought, did he really? And then they were showing the replay.
Yeah,
I thought, did he get hurt? Because it looked to me like he just kind of, understandably, just laid there, out of disappointment of the exertion of playing overtime, coming that close to winning this big game, and
exactly,
yeah.
No, and then it cuts to the handshake line. And he's just walking normally through the handshake line at that point. But yeah, I probably would have collapsed in the same way because I really thought it was going down. But yes, 85-83 in overtime. The Big East keeps delivering on a nightly basis these really, really good basketball games between really high level teams that are really, really well coached. And last night was no exception. Plenty to talk about here. Where would you like to start?
You ready for this?
Oh, boy.
Providence is winning at least a share of the Big East regular season title.
Now, you do realize that the other team won this basketball game, right?
I do realize that. Okay. Do you realize 5 of Providence's last 8 games are at home, including Creighton, Villanova, Xavier, and Seton Hall?
Wait, pause.
Okay.
How unbelievable is it that you just put Villanova in a list of easy games for another Big East team?
Oh, I put it in the list of hard games.
Did you?
Creighton, Nova, Xavier, and Seton Hall.
Oh, that was a mistake then. Put them in the Georgetown St. John's. Put them in the Georgetown St. John's Georgetown game group.
My point being, the games you would look at in terms of the opponent. Mm-hmm. That Providence is most likely to lose in this stretch coming down to the end here are all at home. Right? They get the rematch with Xavier at home. They get Creighton at home. They've already played Marquette twice. They should run the table at home, which is kind of how this has been going, right? Everybody just sort of takes care of business at home. And obviously, that leaves winnable road games that they should take care of. There are a lot of games Providence can win here in a conference that is unforgiving and keeps kind of beating up on itself. And then the other part of this is Bryce Hopkins was 3 of 14 from the field, and they still nearly won at the Cintas Center in overtime.
Mm. Yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from Providence here.
Yeah, this is a game, if you're looking at the schedule, you expect to lose anyway. Now, again, having Zach Fremantle not there helps, certainly, as Xavier's trying to figure out how to kind of retool this because right, they're fundamentally a different team with the players on the floor without the 2 bigs. But I'm just a believer. Ed Cooley's going to do it again. Now, it's entirely possible they end up sharing with Xavier. I'm not going so far as to say they're going to win it outright because they got work to do and Marquette is still there. Mm-hmm. But I feel very confident we are going to look back at the end and Providence is going to be one of the teams that is a Big East regular season champion.
I would be more inclined to agree with you if Xavier didn't still get to play St. John's, Butler twice, DePaul, and Villanova. That's my biggest hesitation. Is that
lost to DePaul once?
Come on, dude, stop it. You don't actually think that they're going to lose to DePaul again at home, do you?
No, my point is.
So it's just as likely that Providence doesn't run the table against the best of the Big East just because they're at home either. If you're going to give Xavier the possibility of losing to DePaul at home.
No, I don't think Xavier's losing that game. My point is I feel slightly more confident about Providence at home than Xavier winning every single game they're supposed to because we've already seen it doesn't.
We're talking about the 18-5 and 10-2 team, right? In the Big East team, right?
Yeah.
You're worried about that team winning the games they're supposed to?
I'm not worried about it. I think there's a loss or 2 in there. Specifically, the rematch of this game.
Okay.
And that's all that Providence would need, right? You just got to play even the rest of the way.
Okay.
I'm sticking with this. Now, if you're asking me, these two teams and maybe even Marquette are going to share the title. I'm not saying I also think Xavier's going to get a piece of it. I do think they're going to end up tied, though.
Okay. So, because I would hand Xavier 5 more wins, hand them to them.
And there's what, 8 left?
And there's 8 left. And the other 3 are Seton Hall, Providence, and Marquette.
All on the road?
That's correct. But the other 5 games against those bad teams are all at home. So
Yeah,
they're 15 and 5. So, and that's 15 and 5 in conference. So you're in on Providence going 6 and 2 the rest of the way.
100%.
Okay. That's fine. I'll respectfully disagree with that, though. I'll respectfully disagree with that because I think there's no way that Providence wins all 5 of those games.
They get 2 losses in there.
You just said they're going to run the table at home.
No, I said I like their chances.
You did. You said they are going to run the table at home.
I said they could.
Okay,
I think they probably lose one. I think they probably lose.
They could run the table. They could win 8 games. They could win the national championship.
One loss at home, 1 loss on the road. 6 and 2, 15 and 5. There you go.
Okay, I will put any money in the world that doesn't happen. But okay,
I'll be expecting a public apology when they do it. Then.
Okay, that's fine. Providence team has a St. Louis and a Miami, Florida loss this year, so they don't beat all the teams they're supposed to either, by the way, just in case you were curious. If you're done, can I talk about this game as well? I mean, do you want to talk about the game or just that Providence is going to win the Big East?
I mean, we can keep talking about it. No, just kidding. Yeah, I have one more thing I want to get to, so go ahead.
I don't think people are talking enough about how Sully Boom is, like how rare what Sully Boom is doing is. I mean, that guy transferred from a mid-major school and is better than he was at said mid-major school.
He's dispelling all of your beliefs about this.
See, my belief has never been that it's not possible.
Well, right.
My belief is that it's unlikely.
Yeah, right. Not in a literal sense if you say it's never possible, but you're right, and rightfully so. Your whole thing is don't expect this to happen. And so Boom said, watch me.
Right. Which is why I probably wasn't as high on Xavier coming into the season as some people were. Because, right, Sully Boom's the most important player on this team for my money. And the guy that, like, we're literally having commentators call him the finisher at the end of games.
Yep.
Because that's the guy you want taking your free throws. That's the guy you want the ball in his hands. He had 20 and 9. He didn't shoot the ball great in this game, but he had 20 and 9 and had 1 turnover in a really high-level Big East game. This is a guy who played at UTEP last year. But because we could just as easily be like, coming into the season, it was perhaps even more likely that you had questions about Xavier's point guard play. Because, Sully Boom not translating immediately from UTEP to the Big East would certainly not be the first time that has happened to somebody. And instead, he is as rock solid as any point guard in the country. And that is why Xavier is for real. As long as they get Fremantle back and he's healthy for, I think during the broadcast last night, they were saying that the hope for Xavier is that they get him back like kind of right before the Big East tournament.
Yeah, kind of to get him a little bit, sort of get him reacclimated right before postseason.
Yeah, maybe you get to bring him back to play Butler at home to end the season and then get him into the Big East. So as long as that happens, because I mean, Jack Nungy had 23 and 14 on 10 to 15 shooting. He was certainly up to the task of being the guy in the front court, but certainly the best version of Xavier obviously is Zach Fremantle being a part of that front court. But it is right. I mean, it's don't let Sully Boom touch the ball. Like, you need to foul somebody else like that kind of, and it goes beyond him just being a good free throw shooter. Mm-hmm. He's super impressive every time I watch Xavier play, just how under control he always looks. And I not in a million years did I think that Sully Boom was going to be the most important player on this Xavier team, but I think that he probably is.
I mean, he's making a run at Big East Player of the Year.
Seriously. And that's super, super impressive. I don't have a ton else other than kind of what you mentioned about Providence and Bryce Hopkins going 3 of 14 from the field and only having 10 points. The fact that they had the ball go halfway down to win this game, even though that was the case, was a good sign for Ed Cooley's team. And if we're gonna entertain this idea of them sharing the Big East regular season, that kind of thing is something you might want to hang your hat on, right? About them finding ways to beat good teams. Like if this game is at Providence, you probably win the game with the exact same performance from Bryce Hopkins, which is a good thing.
The other person I want to give a shout out to, Jerome Hunter may have won this game with his offensive rebounding. I mean, he had 7. And we've talked about this before, that he's been so good in his role this season in terms of just, energy, rebounding, scoring when you need it. And now he's got the bigger responsibility with Fremantle out. Obviously, he's not the same player. But getting that production from the 4 spot from that other player who's kind of stepping up in Fremantle's absence, the dude was everywhere. Mm-hmm. And you don't need him to score. That's what Nungy's there for. That's what Boom's there for. That's what Kobe Jones is there for. But Nungy is a much better defensive rebounder than offensive rebounder, I feel like. And so you have the guy who just crashes the offensive glass, gets you those extra possessions that in a game that comes down to one shot and a game that goes to overtime, kind of allowed Xavier to hang in there as Providence was continuing to put pressure on him at the end. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to give a shout out to him too, because that's also part of the Fremantle absence is Xavier didn't get the exact same thing because Jerome Hunter is not Zach Fremantle, but the player who was tasked with that responsibility to kind of fill that void did so in his own way, and that was part of this game as well.
Yeah. I think Jack Nungy is just such a good positional defender, but a lot of times offensive rebounding can come from just being tough to handle and on the boards, right? And Jack Nungy is tough to handle on the boards because he's huge, but not because he's kind of athletic and he's super, super hard to box out and that kind of thing.
And he doesn't live around the rim either because he can shoot the ball.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But not even it's not like Fremantle is a fantastic offensive rebounder.
No. Yeah.
And Jerome Hunter kind of brings some of that. The last thing I have on this is it's a little ridiculous that Xavier is 100th in defensive efficiency right now. Cause I 8 times every Xavier game, I'm like, that team is so freaking athletic. They're so long. There's arms and legs everywhere. It's Jerome Hunter. It's Colby Jones. It's they're huge. It's Jerome Hunter. It's Colby Jones. It's Desmond Cloud off the bench. It is Desmond. That's his first name, right? Desmond Cloud. One moment. Yes, Desmond Cloud off the bench. And it just there just seems to be long, lanky arms and legs everywhere. And, when this game got going up and down a couple times, it's just man, they are everywhere. And I felt like there were hands in passing lanes and tip balls. And I just think that this team should be better defensively than they are, which is 100th in defensive efficiency right now. But because I just feel like they'd have the bodies to be pretty elite defensively if they wanted to be. And they're 6th offensively and 23rd at KenPom and 18-5 and alone atop the Big East. No, tied with Marquette atop the Big East. Sorry.
Yeah.
So clearly it's working just fine. Now, are they good enough defensively to win a title? No. History would suggest they're nowhere close to winning a title defensively. But I just there were several times I'm man, they are all over the place. Anyways,
and it's kind of how they're built too, right? They don't really have a shooting guard.
Mm-hmm.
They have a ball handler, wings,
and then wings
and tall dudes.
Right,
and that's about it.
Right, and that certainly contributes to the feeling. But I just feel like they're all over the place, and there's so much to handle. They just feel, they look huge through the TV screen. And it's not like they're huge and all of those guys are just kind of standing in the paint, right? It's like Colby Jones.
Right.
They're really athletic guys. So that's fine. That's the way they're made up. And like I said, it's working for them. But I don't think like we're one reality over from Xavier being a really good defensive team, I think. Anyhow, anything else in this game?
No, nothing else on this game.
This game between the Big East regular season champ and the team that will finish just behind them in second.
Oh, so you think Providence is going to win it outright?
Well done. Yeah, that's all I got on that game as well. Anything else exciting happened this week? I don't think so. Marquette beat Villanova. That wasn't exactly surprising. Not a ton really. Oh, did you see how badly Alabama beat Vanderbilt?
I saw it was a very lopsided score at one point and then didn't pay much attention.
Well, here's your trivia time. If you'd only taken the points that Alabama scored in the second half, would they still have beaten Vanderbilt in the entire game?
Yes.
That's correct. Would they have beat them by more than 10?
No.
That's incorrect. They would have beat them by 14 with just their second half. 101-44 was the final score of this game.
Oh my, I didn't realize it was quite that bad.
That's what happens when Vanderbilt goes when Alabama goes 19 of 41 from the 3-point line.
Ah, yes, yep. Mm-hmm. They were saving the threes for Vanderbilt.
They also would have beaten them by almost 20 with just their 3-pointers. Anyways, quite the lopsided loss there for Vanderbilt. Boston College beat Clemson.
Yep.
Nevada beat San Diego State. Not totally surprising. It was at Nevada. That's a team that's also in the running to win a Mountain West title. But that's about all I got for you over the course of this week. This weekend, good basketball games this weekend.
Very
good basketball games. Starting on Saturday at noon, you have Kansas at Iowa State at Hilton Coliseum. I heard Monte Morris is in attendance. I'm kidding. I didn't actually hear that, but that would be like if he's available, get him there.
Yep.
If he's available, get him there. UConn going on the road to a team they struggled to beat at home in Georgetown. I'm just saying. Auburn is at Tennessee. TCU. Can we talk about this for a second? TCU on the road to Oklahoma State. An Oklahoma State team. Oh, never mind. That's at home. I keep assuming that in the parentheses it's going to be their conference record, and it's not. On ESPN, it's the record. Away or at home. So never mind. At Oklahoma State, Miami and Clemson, the top 25 matchup in the ACC at 3:00. Then you get Purdue and Indiana at 4 from Bloomington. Texas and Kansas State at 4:00 as well. Man, a loaded 4:00. Jeez.
We're going to figure out how the Big 12 is going to sort of who your favorites are going to be coming down the stretch between those two games.
Yep, 100%. And then at 10:30, the nightcap. When was the last time that Gonzaga played a West Coast Conference game in which they weren't the higher rated team at KenPom? St. Mary's is 7th at KenPom right now.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say something about ranked teams. And I was going to say, well, they do that every once in a while. Yeah, no, I got no clue on that.
I have zero clue. Like ever?
Pretty few?
In the KenPom era?
Yeah.
KenPom era is what, 2002, right?
Something like that.
No way, right? Well, let's see. Let's start in 02 and go the other way. Pepperdine. Nope. Okay. 02 Gonzaga nobody was close in 03. Nobody was close in 04. Nobody was close in 05 or 06.
You're determined to find this.
Not in 07. Gonzaga was 49th at KenPom in 07. Santa Clara was next closest at 77th. I doubt they were ever higher that year. Gonzaga was 25th and St. Mary's was 42nd in 2008. There might be something there, but probably not. not 2009 or 10. Well, it was probably 2010. In 2010, Gonzaga finished 44th at KenPom, and St. Mary's finished 29th at KenPom.
Okay.
So it was probably then. But on Saturday, they will play St. Mary's as the 17th ranked team at KenPom, and St. Mary's is 7th. So an absolutely loaded Saturday slate. Is there anything fun on Sunday? No, there's not. There is one top 25 team playing on Sunday, and it is Houston. Well, it's a little bit fun because they play the team that just beat them at home. Little Houston Temple rematch. I'm guessing that Temple probably won't sweep the season series against Houston, but maybe I'm wrong. What if we look up and Houston is like a 2 or 3 seed and they finish the season, they got 4 losses going into the tournament, and like they lose to Temple twice in the regular season and again in the AAC tournament. What if they just have 3 losses to Temple?
It's just Temple and Virginia.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, they beat Virginia. Sorry.
No, Temple and Alabama. Right?
That's what it was. Yeah, it was one of those good teams, right? They beat Virginia. Alabama. Yeah. Temple 3. It's just the red teams. Temple 3 times in Alabama.
It's just the red teams. A Temple team that ultimately won't sniff the NCAA tournament unless they win the AAC.
If they get that 3rd win, who knows?
Yeah, but they keep. You're not wrong. They keep doing things like losing to bad AAC teams. It's not like they're also running the table. Houston back up to 1st at KenPom, by the way. Temple has losses to Tulane and Memphis. They are 8-2. Losses. No, they did start the season with losses to Wagner, Vanderbilt, St. John's, and Richmond.
Yeah. I was gonna say the non-con was rough.
They also had losses to Penn, Mississippi, and Maryland Eastern Shore. Those are, those teams I just mentioned. 0 of them are inside the top 75 KenPom. Only 2 of them are inside the top 100. So Aaron McKee's team probably going to have to win the AAC tournament to get in.
Hey, they're making it interesting at least.
100%. 100%.
It's all about that in-season improvement.
Naturally,
good coaching.
Hey, they're 8-2 since December 20th. How about that?
Yeah.
Well done. You got anything else?
It's just tangentially related. I'm just going to throw it out there now. I will be very upset if we don't get a New York Liberty, Las Vegas Aces WNBA Finals.
Ooh. It's true. The big 3, the new big 3 in New York.
The Liberty just went from rebuild with Sabrina Ionescu to we have all the firepower very, very quickly.
Did they win a series in the playoffs last year, or did they lose?
I'm pretty sure because they won that one game, but they lost the series, I'm pretty sure.
Did they lose the series? Because they did make the playoffs. They're like the 8th seed, right?
And I think they won the first game and then lost 2 to the Sky, if I remember correctly.
I believe you're right. Yeah. I believe you're right.
Yeah, this is a whole other ball game. Stewie, Jonquel Jones, and Sabrina Ionescu gets to play with 2 of the best bigs in the league. I mean,
yeah.
I want it. We got 2. We got 2 elite teams.
He said, "I want it.
I want this finals so bad."
That was too good.
Because it's just so clear who the best 2 teams are, and you don't usually get that. It could be. I mean, yeah. I want it for Sabrina. Yeah. I want it for the league. I want it for me.
No, we can have a conversation about whether or not that's a good thing for the WNBA. But if it's not going to be a good thing for the WNBA, at least we can get them in the finals, please.
Yeah, right? And it's not like the Aces are going to be right there, ready to battle with them.
Right.
It's not like they're going to run. It's not a Warrior situation where they're going to run roughshod over everybody.
You're probably right. But yeah, that's fun. That was fun to have the WNBA kind of have a big part in the news cycle over the last 24 hours because of what is taking shape with the Liberty. Anyways, do you have anything else? Anything else that's tangentially related?
No, I don't think so. Looking forward to this weekend.
Me too. Please subscribe to the Jays for Days podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Jays for Days Pod. Check out the YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, any other social medias that we have? I don't think so, right?
No.
Okay. We don't have a B-reel, do we? I still don't really understand how B-roll works. Do you know
I don't
how
even know what you're
B-roll
talking
works?
about.
Okay, cool. We are old around these pots. We do have a TikTok though, and if you want bite-sized content of the podcast, you can find it there as well as on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh, and we will see you later.